And welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report. We have Ann Morrison here. Ann, what's the latest topics we're going to cover today? Because you have some of the most intense and important scientific information ever. And I don't know of any other source on the internet, the blogosphere, or even regular news media print that covers the information that you provide like you do. And we often do videos either the same day or the next day during the weekend. What are the topics for today?
Well, we're going to be talking about biosecurity, Dr. Deagle, and also radiation. And we're going to be talking about crony capitalism and also some climate change information that you're going to find very interesting.
I'll bet.
And we're going to be talking about the NASA report that talks about why the plane of the solar system is tilted to the equator of the sun.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. All right, I want to first talk about Zika, because the CDC has put out a caution for Brownsville, Texas. Now, Brownsville is at the far southern tip of Texas, just across the border from Mexico.
Right.
And essentially everything that's in Brownsville is colored yellow. They use yellow as a cautionary area, and they don't want pregnant women. They're advising pregnant women to postpone travel there, or if people are planning to get in a family way. And they have published a map, and that is because they had 4 or 5 people who came down with Zika, locally transmitted. Now, you know, I usually have my own commentary on what the CDC is doing, and they don't know that they didn't catch it from somebody who had traveled and brought it back with them, because they aren't keeping track of people who have Zika. But in
other words, their lack of data interferes with their ability to determine the route of original infection. Right?
Yes,
whether or not it's a primary infection that they acquired because they got bitten, or sexual activity with somebody who brought it back, for example.
Right. All they do is, if you get Zika, they ask you about your travel history, and apparently none of these 4 or 5 people had traveled outside of or into the South America or the Caribbean, or someplace where we know that Zika is endemic, and so they just automatically put them in the category of having been bitten by a mosquito that carried Zika. Well, that's not the only way that you can get it. Like you said, Zika is sexually transmitted.
It's also transmitted probably by a blood. For example, let's say you get Zika, and in the initial phase when it's in your bloodstream, and you donate blood, or you're taking care of somebody that has a lot of, we call viral load being given off in their tears, like this one gentleman would take care of their relative in Utah. They got it, apparently they thought it was in the tears of their dying relative. There's lots of routes to get it, and a blood, for example, most people are aware our blood supply in America is not safe against Chagas spirochetosis, which is apparently infected 100 million people from Central and South America, and in 20 years is a 100% rate of terminal dilatory cardiomyopathy and death. People don't know that. They don't know that our blood supply is not safe against hepatitis C, because they aren't screening for hepatitis C in our blood supply. They don't tell people that there's chronic things like Lyme parasites in the blood, that also they're not screening the blood supply for, that you can get Lyme disease by getting a blood supply from someone who actually has chronic Lyme, whether they're symptomatic or not. So our blood supply is not safe.
So I guess the best we can say is that there were 4 or 5 people who caught Zika in Brownsville, Texas, and we don't know by what route, but it would probably be prudent for women who want to get pregnant or who are pregnant not to go to Brownsville, because they might catch it in the same way. Now, I'm not saying it was a mosquito. I'm just saying they caught it.
Right.
Locally.
Yeah, whatever route that is. Yeah, that's important. And I guess what we're really saying now, too, is that there's a change in the danger range for people also that is increasing. So it's now embedding itself into the environment in the southern United States, and that's significant, isn't it?
Well, it is because there's so many modes of transmission. That's
Right.
what's making it. Yeah, that's what's making it so dangerous. You don't need the mosquito in order to get Zika. All you have to do is be around somebody who's standing 3 feet in front of you talking to you, and you're getting their saliva in your mouth, and they have Zika.
Yeah.
So.
Another thing, by the way, we didn't talk about that I want to raise this issue, because I like raising questions that nobody really wants. It's like, oh no, why'd you ask that question? My brain's on fire now. Why don't we also screen for the Oxytec gene to see if it's jumped into some of the people that not only get bitten, but the gene, which is a transposon jumping gene, actually is getting it into hosts, vectors, and even plants, which they found in Georgia with the bulwark moth that had these genes 10 years ago. So, because I think the gene plague itself is actually another aspect of this that we're not looking at. Like, what does it do to a population in a biosphere? We don't know.
Well, yes.
It's a big we don't know. Like, we have no idea what the heck it's going to do. But we do know it'll do something.
We know that the FDA has approved its use. We know that the USDA has approved its use. And in a trial in Florida, probably in the Keys,
right.
And but they have done no studies to see what happens to that gene when the mosquito is through with it, or when it transfers it into a human being.
Well, I tell you, I'm going to quote Dr. Mei-Wan Ho from the early 2000s and his repeat report in 2014 that it changed the lignin concentration in plants, the bulwark moth genes, which are found, it changes the genetics and fertility of other organisms, and it can probably increase the oxidative stress in the host. So if you have an RNA virus, it will, under oxidative stress, mutate up to 10,000 times faster than a DNA virus. So it's going to have all kinds of untoward effects that we really have no freaking idea about. And the problem is we have to approach it with humility and honesty, or we're going to never figure out before it's a disaster, something terrible happens. And this is what's happening even with releasing these genes. I mean, do we really know what's going to happen? We now know, for example, that when they release the genes into Brazil, which is the third largest economy in the world producing meat, that they have a background contamination with tetracycline, which is going to make this gene complex completely useless. It's bizarre, isn't it?
It is bizarre. And our FDA is just not doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. And in fact, the president of the current administration was on the television. He gave a press conference, and he said, we're giving some money to the CDC. And what the CDC is going to do with that money is they are going to ask anybody in the United States who has a solution to this problem to contact us. Now, does that sound like they're doing their... I'm not kidding. It was on television. I watched him say those words.
You know what the problem is? They put what we call political hacks, and people are trying to move up in whatever organization, the CDC, the EPA, whatever. And most of them basically don't have the brains to get it to actually do a PhD thesis challenge before a real panel of top-level PhD professors. The problem is that the most important thing to do is ask better questions, not have the best, think good answers to market to your people you're trying to convince. That's why I've seen professors do what I call linear research. And by that, here's what I mean. If you prove one thing, let's say in your first year of your tenure as a professor, and then 5 years later you prove something that kind of disproves what you already said, you're going to lose your tenure. Now, if you prove that, yeah, I was right, but what happens is these professors dig themselves a deeper and deeper hole, and then realize academically they're telling people lies, but it's shrouded in so much educational and eloquent garbage that it's just BS. And so most of the medical research, most of the biological science research is either they're trying to spin to create a new drug or a new technology or to prove what we previously said was true, so they dig a deeper and deeper hole for themselves rather than finding out, yeah, what I previously found out was BS, but here's what's really going on. And if you find the odd professor to do that, they usually get in trouble. And that's one of the things I've noticed through my research is people just don't stay honest. They play this kind of academic game so that they maintain their tenure in the same way with government departments or drug companies developing drugs like this Oxytec gene. They didn't, when Intrexon bought out the Oxytec company from Oxford University, then Intrexon is out of Maryland. it says their tagline is better living through better DNA. Yeah, really. How about better living through better quarterly profits by proving that previously what we said was truth, even though it's BS and it's dangerous? You know, you don't want somebody like me in a court of law or a grand jury when you've said BS, because believe me, I'm going to take you apart like I do an intellectual vivisection. And I really find it very disturbing that people don't ask enough questions, like when they're releasing these things, do they really know what it'll do? For example, if they want to stop these viruses, what would you think is the best way to get rid of the virus?
Me?
Yes, what do you think?
I want their budget.
Well, I can tell you.
Kind of question.
Remember I mentioned to you that if you ask me any question, any sphere of influence, I can come up with an answer or a framework to find an answer on any issue that mankind has. Now, that's a pretty bold statement. Now, 10% of the time I know the answer, 90% God will inspire me on the spot, but I'll give you the first thing. Have you heard of radionics before? Radionics has been used by farmers for like 100 years. If you have the radionic harmonic frequencies, now I know this is classified research, but the Russians have done a lot of work in this. And they were developing superbugs up in their facility north of Moscow. And the entire city was technicians, 250,000 technicians and scientists. Some of the bioreactors were 5 stories high. We're talking about giant facilities north of Moscow, in the middle of nowhere. And they had a release in the 1970s of one of their very advanced bioweapons, and they had to use a harmonic resonance weapon to actually kill it, because when it got out of containment, this thing could have spread like wildfire and killed pretty well any mammalian species within thousands of miles. So they basically set off this resonant frequency bomb, and anything that had that resonant frequency harmonic in their DNA got destroyed. So we have radionic technology right now that actually can immobilize or decrease the infectivity or neutralize this virus. The second thing that we need to do is we need to start what I call target bombing, what I call specifically designed ways of getting technology into the organism to make sure that it can't spread the bug. For example, they've done research in Australia about infecting the mouth parts of the mosquitoes, so they, even if they have the bug inside them, they can't transmit it through the biting parts of their mouth. That's already been done. So to me, what we would identify is using what I call imaging technology, which, by the way, this is classified. They do have this radionic imaging technology. They could identify which parts of the keys or any of the areas and just bomb it from the air with the same technology that the Australians already have that will stop the insect and mosquito from even infecting people. And the third thing is, in endemic areas where there's a problem, every woman should be taking Allicin Med. If you take Allicin Med, and one of our other antipathogenics or two, but Allicin Med, the biting insects won't even bite you, because you create thiol compounds. The insect comes near you and says, no way, man, not today. They're not going to bite you. You're going to die. So those 3 things alone right now, and this is, by the way, some classified technology, could take out the Zika virus. Now, we don't understand this, but they've been playing around with bioweapons for years, and not only here, but people should understand the 2 most advanced bioweapons outside the Soviet Union and Israel is in Syria and in Iran. And this is the old biopreparat program, and we've not touched on it before. But part of the reason why they want to take out Bashar al-Assad is because he's got very advanced bioweapons from the former Soviet Union. He's not using them. In fact, he passed over his chemical weapons, and this embarrassed our so-called State Department director, idiot. I call him John Kerry. He looks like Lurch from the Addams Family, doesn't he? Couldn't he work as Lurch if they had a movie out about him? Yes, I'm Lurch, from Addams Family. He looks like him, doesn't he? So,
well, you're making fun of a whole lot of people that live in the Northeast.
No.
Yeah.
No, I think it's his attitude. I don't care about his looks. But the way he acts like we all should just accept what he says, because he has a very slow drawl, and he says it with what appears to be an honest voice, which really is dishonest, because the guy doesn't have a clue. He really doesn't. And, I don't attack people because they don't know things. I attack people because they try to lie to me. If they don't really fully understand things, I like to ask them questions, so I dissemble their so-called lies. So whether I'm talking to a consultant or doing a medical legal case, because they have a bunch cooking right now, or I'm trying to ask scientists or people that are so-called doctors or specialists questions to disassemble their so-called academic wall they put around themselves to pretend that they're so smart, I like to ask questions because I don't mind being ignorant. I mean, I wake up in the morning and say, God, I am very ignorant this morning. I know nothing. God says, yes, I know you know nothing, Deagle. And I'll help you because you listen to me. That's it. People need to understand that if we don't start from a point of honesty and ignorance and humility, we're going to screw things up. And especially when we have the power of technology and chemicals and warfare and messing around with the ionosphere of the planet and everything. And I'm really concerned. I'm concerned when somebody puts out a notice of, if you have an answer out there, please tell us. We're clueless. That is, to me, that's a first statement of not only honesty, it scares the hell out of me that our so-called elected officials have got all these experts in all these boards and so on that really don't know what the hell they're doing. That's really disturbing.
It's really disturbing. Okay, yeah. I want to go on to the next one, which happens to do with fusarium. And you remember what fusarium is?
Yes.
Fusarium is a fungus that attacks wheat if the wheat gets wet in the later stages of its growth. So after the heads are formed, and then if the rain comes, then fusarium is a fungus that will grow on those grains.
I think they had a big problem like that in Russia back, was it the 40s or 50s, where the fusarium killed a lot of people?
Well, the people were starving, and they didn't have any food, so they just went ahead and ground up the wheat with the fungus on it, and they all died, and then the Soviets turned it into a biological weapon. But this is what's happening today. In Western Canada, the worst crop disease, that's what they call fusarium, is a serious issue this year. Now, I have a chart here from 2003 to 2016, and the mean percent of the samples containing the fusarium damaged kernels, that's what you take to the silo, is in Manitoba, and that's about 90%. And in Saskatchewan, it's at 80%.
No, are they going to grind this up and put it into food supplies so people are not going to be aware, but they're going to get biotoxins that'll hurt them or kill them?
No. The silage people, they won't take it at all. They won't even put it in their silos. Now, what they do, and they will mark it as non-food grade. But then you wonder, it's non-food grade.
Does non-food grade get in the food of animals, though?
Well, it'll kill animals too. I mean, this is
who are they going to sell it to? Are they going to just grind it up and put it back in the soil, or what's their goal?
Well, let me just tell you what I know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
my brain is on fire with questions like, oh my God, what are they doing here with this?
Well, they finally told everybody that they had this head blight, fusarium head blight, and the mycotoxin that it produces is called deoxynivalenol. Deoxynivalenol. And it's abbreviated DON. D for the D and oxy, ni for the O, and is nivalenol. And it's a mycotoxin, and many fungi produce mycotoxins that are toxic to humans. So what the Russians did, what the Soviets did, was that they found out that DON was the problem, and they weaponized it. In other words, they separated it out from the wheat, and they spread it over a couple of villages, and everybody died. And this was before the bioweapons convention was held. So it's legacy for them. Anyway, the United States suggests that the flour contain no more than 1 part per million, and some millers and food processors may demand less. So we're talking about the Canada Western Amber Durum, and that's used to make pasta, and it's unmarketable as a milling grade.
My question is, what do they sell it for, and who's going to use it? Whoa.
Well, we're going to get into that.
Basically contaminated wheat.
Well, you're not going to believe this, but this is one of the things they're doing, is that excuse me, is that as it turns out, the wheat that is grown in Canada is exceptionally fine wheat for cooking, especially for the Europeans. They like it for pastas, and they like it for their for their breads and cakes.
Right.
Anyway, so they're mixing it with wheat that comes from other areas, for instance, from Europe or from England, and they just mix it until they get it down to a percentage that they can call that it's edible, and then they use that.
My.
Of course.
Damn it.
Well, otherwise they can't make the bread that they're used to making. And of course they do have, the farmers have insurance, but it just, it's just curtailing their export market for their wheat in a very difficult way.
Well, I'll give you a solution to it. You know how we use various methods of, in a sense, dialyzing out toxins like we do with water supplies? If we ground it down to a very fine grain, we could actually dialyze out the toxins by having things that would grab those specific toxins, columns that would grab the toxins and pull it out specifically. So I think what we need to do is we need to be innovative, because a lot of our food supplies in the world, because they're monocultures and because of the spread of pathogens like this, we're at more and more risk, and we probably have more biotoxins out in the environment that are infecting one or more crops that we don't even know about. And some of them are internal because they're genetically modified technologies, so the crop is generating biomolecules that are probably bad for our biology or the biology of vectors or other organisms that we don't even know about. The problem is we don't approach it from a point of ignorance and realize, like, maybe we're doing stuff that's bad but we just don't know yet. But with this one here, I would say, why don't you guys in Canada listen and create a technology to extract the toxin so that you can get it down to zero detectable toxin, and then you can export not the wheat but the actual fine ground flour, if you want to call it. That to me would make a much more logical thing. Then you can certify it's even cleaner than anything else because you've certified that there's no toxins at all in it.
Okay.
So,
well, let me tell you a little bit more about this fusarium.
Right.
There was an outbreak of Fusarium oxysporum that affected the coca plantations in Peru. And
coca make chocolate. You mean like the coca bean?
Yeah, I mean like the one that you make cocaine from.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So in other words, people who are coke users in Hollywood might be getting Fusarium toxin? Whoa.
Well, now let me tell you the whole story.
Yeah.
So in the year 2000, a proposal was passed to use the agent as part of Plan Colombia. And you remember Plan Colombia was when they were going to stop the drug trade in the country of Colombia. And in response to concerns that the use of the fungus could be perceived as biological warfare, well, of course it's biological warfare.
Are you kidding me? They don't know it's biological warfare, and it's on its face. It's like if someone takes a gun and tries to put a bullet in your face, that's called gun warfare against your face. So they're not going to call it what it actually is. That's crazy. Plus, it can get into other crops besides just a coca plant, right?
Let me go on.
Yeah, please.
The Clinton administration, now this is the Bill Clinton administration, waived this use of Fusarium. So in other words, they took it out of the biological warfare category. Uh-oh. And instead, if you go to biological warfare, you'll see this term DON, and that's because that's the active part. But right. Fusarium was there until the year 2000 when they said, no, we're going to put Fusarium there.
Right.
And then in 2006, they mandated the testing of mycoherbicide agents, either the Fusarium or there were other things, in field trials in the U.S. territory. So they had to test them before.
Right.
And the use of Fusarium for these tests has raised concerns because the fungus has been implicated in the birth of 31 anacephalic children. Remember those births?
Yeah.
No, you remember?
Whoa, yeah. Wow, that's an amazing conclusion, Ann. Scary stuff. You're brilliant, and you've got a giant 6-foot-tall scientific can opener here, and you're opening up some oil drum-sized cans of really bad stuff.
Well, and our government was implicated. And do you think that they made good on any, you think the people that had those children got any payments? Were they made whole?
Just like the vaccine court, They set up this vaccine court to protect the industry and the big drug companies that make vaccines. from direct prosecution and scientific endeavor that would determine that vaccines are dangerous by and large, and anything that can be injected, including things like the Gardasil that changes your genetics to generate the antigen of the virus, is then a very meddlesome and scientifically dangerous, stupid idea. So, wow. What's the next story you want to cover?
Well, the first thing I heard when I turned on the news this morning was that Corpus Christi had a water problem, and they told their residents. Corpus Christi is in Texas,
right?
And it's a pretty big city, but they have water problems. I mean, if you look at Corpus Christi water, you'll get all sorts of things off the internet. I mean, they have I don't know what's wrong with their system, but they had another. But in this case, it wasn't that you could use the water for bathing, and you couldn't boil it or anything. You just had to stay away from the water, period. Right. And they didn't hand out water. They just said drink bottled water, but they didn't give the people bottled water. So what they finally did was they said the chemical that was in it was called indolin AA-86, and it's used in the petrochemical industry as an asphalt emulsifier. And they said, so the city said that there was a spill of that chemical. Whoa. And that may have seeped, now this is their word, seeped into the city's water system. And they closed the schools and all that. But apparently this stuff is really, it doesn't kill you so much as it just gets into you. And on maybe you see the MSDS for it. The emergency is that it causes eye and skin burns, so you don't want to, that's why they don't want you to bathe in the water. It causes severe respiratory tract irritation. It may cause allergic skin reaction. It causes damage to the following organs: respiratory, eye lens, and cornea,
right.
Skin. And it may cause damage to the digestive system and gastrointestinal tract. Do not get in skin or on skin or clothing. Avoid breathing vapor or mist. Keep container closed. You know, it's corrosive to the eyes. It's corrosive to the skin. It's extremely irritating to the respiratory system, and it may cause burns to the mouth, throat, and stomach.
Right.
So this wasn't something that people could do anything about. I mean, it was in their water, and they just what the government, what the city government told the people was, don't have anything to do with any water that's coming out of your tap.
Right.
And so they were like that for 2 or 3 days, and I think now they've lifted that order. But they've decided that they're going to sue. They're going to sue the one of the chemical manufacturers, Valero. And if you look at this picture of Corpus Christi, I mean, it's a huge oil and gas refinery system. I mean, there's. I'm looking at it, and there's probably 25 of these fracking things sticking up out of the air. All the things that they use to separate the types of oil and gas.
Yeah, and you're talking about these towers are not just oil and gas refineries. You're talking about fracking towers.
Well, whatever you call it when they separate out the different weights of oil and gas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're pretty tall. And the city officials blamed a backflow incident. And, of course, the company said that it wasn't caused by them.
Right.
We believe this issue was isolated to a lateral industrial line, and we think it's because the city is using contract labor to run their water system. See, they don't have anybody. Normally the people that run the water system in a city are government employees. Right. I mean, you want them to be, because contract labor doesn't have near the perks that an employee has.
Right.
And so you don't get as committed a workforce.
Right.
Anyway, so
sloppy, in other words.
Well, they aren't getting paid to be anything else.
Right.
All right, I want to move on to the EPA had been told by Congress to study the health effects of hydraulic fracturing. of oil and gas, and its potential impact on drinking water. So they published this report, and I have a map here that shows where they found hydraulically fractured well locations, and it's mostly in Texas and Oklahoma and Ohio and Pennsylvania and Kentucky and on up the front face of the Rocky Mountains. So, and the report said, well, this is just out of the executive summary, they said, yeah, there could be some problem because there could be spills that would reach the groundwater, or they might inject fracturing fluids into wells, allowing groundwater problems, and they might just direct their fracturing fluids directly into the groundwater. And not only that, they might have runoff that would go into rivers or streams or whatever.
Right.
And then sometimes they put them the fracturing wastewater in unlined pits. And but when it got down to it about whether it was going to affect the drinking water, they made a statement that says the data gaps and uncertainties described in this report also precluded a full characterization severity of impacts. So they're asking for another report to be funded. And,
in other words, they're not going to tell you because they don't think you have enough data to make a conclusion or a statement. Here's the first question. What chemicals are they using, and what biological effects in parts per million or billion will happen?
Well, I remember doing a blog where I listed all the chemicals that they're using. I mean, it's page after page after page of chemicals, and some of them are very dangerous to human health.
Right. So, in other words, there's three different classes of the chemicals. The first one is number one, they're irritants. Number two, they're genotoxins. Number three, they're biotoxins, which directly interfere with metabolic processes. The problem is, and this is something that I brought up even during the campaign of Donald Trump, and also we call the red Democrat states where they're supporting. Because remember now, Hillary Clinton kind of flipped on this whole idea of fracking. Bernie Sanders was very much against fracking. But you have to understand this: fracking should never, ever, ever be done with chemicals. They can do fracking with high-powered steam and microwaves, but the idea of doing it with chemicals will poison the aquifers like Ogallala, and you're not going to stick it somewhere and it's not going to migrate over days, weeks, months, and years. So this idea that you can safely do it, we've estimated already, just with the current state of the art of the industry, which has, by the way, been killed by the price of oil being so low that their fracking industry is really pretty deado now, that it's affected 5% of the water supply of Americans. So 5% of the water supply already is poisoned. We're not just talking about Flint, Michigan, where they're taking an old battery plant and they've got some poisons in the water. We're talking about literally poisoning the entire aquifer systems across most of the Midwest, United States, Texas, and the Northeast areas are also Lake Erie. So this is pretty stupid stuff. And if you have alternative technology, just like we had Corexit 9500 for dispersing oil, all the other divisions of the U.S. government, including the military, use non-toxic ways of dispersing oil. But because the major oil companies have made backroom deals with the White House, they used Corexit 9500 as a dispersing agent during this disaster at the Macondo drill site in the Gulf of Mexico, and it's still being used. These idiots are still using this crap. So the first thing I'm going to do is make certain I make representations to my contacts through Donald Trump, say, I don't mind you fracking, but there's three things you got to do. Number one, don't use these chemicals. Number two, make sure you reinsert the material you're taking out after you do the fracking at the relatively same specific gravity and the same little rock layer. Otherwise, in places like Oklahoma City, you're going to generate what's called frac quakes, because the rock structure is such that if you extract and put a different specific gravity, and it's interesting, we've got Rex Tillerson. People don't realize this, but Rex Tillerson and ExxonMobil, when they did their extraction of oils and putting back different specific gravity materials in the Aceh, Indonesia earthquake zone, this is what produces this upthrust superquake that killed 250,000 people. People need to be aware of that. And don't presume because they're a big company that they're scientifically valid or careful. They really should understand that you don't put something down of a different specific gravity or poison water supplies or set up things where you can actually create an earthquake by altering the fault lines. I know the Division of Mines in Colorado did an experiment back in the 80s, and they actually were putting down materials into the fault lines, just trying to see what the heck it would do up in Boulder, and they precipitated a 4.7 earthquake. So when you start putting material down along fault line zones, and you change the mu or specific internal resistance of the rock faces, you can precipitate a great big damn earthquake, and this is what's happening in Oklahoma. So they try to pare back these issues, but the water supplies are being poisoned, and this idea that somehow they can do it safely and it's going to be good and we'll be energy independent, I don't care about the pulling it out of these microwaves, but God help us. If they poison the aquifers, they'll kill the ability to generate safe water and safe food in America. It's just crazy. And it's like, 20 or 30 year run to get all this oil and gas out and poison the aquifers forever. It's really insane. Yep.
Anyway, so I have done research on that, and that is on my blog. Right. All right. We have 4 or 5 people in Alaska who are dead as a result of a new Streptococcus bacteria.
Pyogenes.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Pyogenes, yeah.
Pyogenes.
This is a real nasty one. This is one that can eat away a limb on you. You're like, bam, you got it, man. If you don't get that kind of control, it can eat away a limb or a chunk of your lungs in a matter of hours.
Yeah, one of the people lost an arm, and another person lost multiple digits, and it also eats away at all your soft tissue, and so that's why they lose it, because they can't stop it.
Do you know the reason why? The bacterium has as one of its main weapons against your body a thing called hyaluronidase. And if you want to invest in tissue planes, you have to have a hyaluronidase enzyme. It's one of the major weapons that bacteria have. And it literally dissolves the soft tissue gel in between your cells as it invades the tissue planes. So it literally dissolves. It's like a B movie. It literally dissolves the tissue material and the hyaluronic acid holding the polymer of your cells of your arm or leg, whatever, together before it eats away and chews you up and spits you out. That's scary.
And they found that, sometimes, people can get colonized by this bacteria but may not get sick. And you think of them typhoid Mary, and they can have typhoid, they can have strep Mary. And I know some stories about that. Anyway, and there can be a higher risk to certain racial demographic groups, including Native Americans. So the cases in Alaska have mostly been middle-aged Alaska Native men and alcoholics who have stayed in homeless shelters. And so I want to tell people again, stand 6 feet away from everybody that you talk to, because you don't want to get something like that. All right, let's go into radiation.
Right.
I still 9 Mile Point in New York, which is up by Lake Huron, had a hot shutdown, and they are a hot shutdown. They had a manual scram, and they went from 100% power to 0, and that's because they put the control rods into the fuel rods and stops the generation of heat. And what happened was that they had a vibration in the steam that was because the water level was vibrating. And so
that happened, by the way, in a plant up in San Onofre, 12 miles from here, where they put too many steam turbine tubes in, and literally the steam turbine tubes start to rattle and bang against each other to cause a major what's called internal loop leak, where it actually leaked the radioactive material in the inner core of the reactor. And this is a new reactor, by the way, made by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, $800 million a piece that they destroyed. And it was already happening, and then finally they got a power shutdown, and it really blew it up. So,
we've had vibrations as problems in several of the plants just since we've been talking about them. And there's 1 million people within a 50-mile radius, and it was licensed in 1969. So 89 would be the 20-year life, and obviously they've got extensions from the NRC twice, and they're probably using the high burnout fuel.
Yeah, there's 3 different criteria you can use to actually measure the toxic of any radiation site. Small for days babies, incidence of congestive heart failure, and dementia. And if you use those three criteria in the death rate in various zones around the reactor, you'll see how much, if you backdate, you'll find how much is tritium released and thorium and other isotopes. But that's the best marker, is to actually look at the zones of death and the incidence of these three markers around any nuclear plant in America.
Well, we have babies with anencephaly being born to mothers in the three counties that are west of the Hanford plant.
Right.
And they still haven't owned up to the fact that it could be the radiation that was causing this.
Well, the Hanford reactor site is one of the most radioactive on Earth.
Yeah. Okay, Grand Junction, Colorado. They had counts per minute of gamma in the energy range 600 to 800 kilo electron volts.
Right.
And the high is 661. So you people up there in Grand Junction, Colorado, you need to call your emergency managers and find out why you are being subjected to gamma radiation. And I'm not going to go over everything else because I've got to talk about something that you and I had talked about earlier, and that was that the scientists want to give the atmosphere an antacid.
Uh-oh.
Now, you remember what Plan B is. Plan B is where they wanted to change the albedo of the Earth so not as much sunlight would come through. In other words, it would be shiny in the high atmosphere, and the sun's rays would bounce off of that and not warm up the Earth.
This is part of the harebrained ideas of people like Igor, I call Al Gore, and Leonardo DiCaprio. Right?
Yeah, well, this is part of geoengineering.
Right.
And they have a new approach. The approach is that they want to, instead of using sulfur, they want to use a spray of calcium carbide.
Nanoparticles. I hope you have time after the show today. We'll do a video kind of updating all this stuff. This is pretty crazy stuff. I mean, I don't think people realize the lack of scientific rigor and the stupidity. For example, right now we're heading into a Maunder ice age, and it's also changing the spectral pattern of the light. There's a decrease in ultraviolet light, and a decrease in infrared and visible light already to the planet. And we're heading into a Maunder cooling period for 75 to 90 years, which means we're doing it at the very time we're actually heading into a minor, we call a mini ice age, which they could make considerably worse. The actual ancient records show that where I am in Southern California, in San Diego County, the temperature could drop 4 to 5 degrees on average year-round temperature. And yes, we'll have some mixed seasons where you have some weird spikes in temperature, like we're already having with the polar inversion. But the danger is that the northern latitudes, like across Canada, will be under snow a lot of time of the year, so such as winter wheat and so on will never get planted anymore because it'll be too damn cold. And we're already seeing that with this winter big freeze that you can see over in Drudge and all the maps they have. This idea of a harebrained idea of changing the albedo of the planet without looking at the full, nonlinear models of what's really going on with the planet is pretty damn stupid and crazy. It's, these people are nuts. And they try to do it without any vote from either the regular citizens on Earth or other scientists like myself that are real environmentalists, not a pseudo-environmentalist like Igor or Leonardo DiCaprio, or idiots like Hillary Clinton and Jill Stein, who doesn't have a clue. These people are nuts.
Okay, we have so little time left. I need to move on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Exxon sued the Attorney General in Massachusetts because the Attorney General was taking them to court. And so Exxon went before a judge, and what the Attorney General was saying was that because Exxon is so big in gas and oil, they're changing the climate. And now listen to this sentence.
You're talking about Massachusetts. So Massachusetts was actually trying to say this. Okay, go ahead.
Yes. In a virtually unprecedented ruling, federal judge in Texas says that the Massachusetts Attorney General must answer questions about her climate investigation to Exxon lawyers.
Right.
Have you ever heard of anything? Mm-hmm. It's so ridiculous. And so she says she's going to appeal that. They're saying, why did you pick on us? Why didn't you pick on a different gas and oil company? Why are you blaming us? And he says, I've never heard of such a thing. The court certainly has the power to order a deposition, but I never heard of anything like this.
Yeah.
And that bold order, flowing from a Texas court, federal court, has allowed Exxon wide latitude in defending itself against multiple investigations.
Right.
And it also foreshadows a new legal standard that could have chilling consequences on attorney generals across the country. That's a message to the attorney generals that if they are considering bringing a case against industry, they could be open to questioning about their motive.
Right.
And normally, AGs cannot be intimidated, but this is something that will be a factor in their decisions about what cases and what industries to pursue.
Well, it's like going up to a bully. You pick the biggest bully and then hit him in the nose, right? So the AG of Massachusetts say, well, Exxon, I'm going to go and I'm going to punch Rex Tillerson in the nose. Bad idea, guys. You lawyers need to stop lawyering up and realize you need some science behind it when you start legal presentations based on pseudoscience. And you're going to get in trouble. And this is what's happening. They have their own army of lawyers as well, Exxon does, and they have scientists as well.